Okay,
So,
good stuff.
all right.
Justin, you've been a banker for a while.
I was a banker for a very long time. Yes.
Yeah. And you decided to leave the corporate world, being employed, having a good salary, traveling the world, because you're working for the company Barclays, and they're kind of like anywhere and everywhere.
No, absolutely. I mean, I had a great time. I had a fantastic time working through the corporate. But when you come out of school, that's what you're trained for. You're geared to get into that, and that's what's seen as successful. And so there's definitely something inside which is like, if you get a job with the bank, if you get the promotion, if you get to travel, if you get relocated, it's success. And that's what's programmed into your university. So for many years, I was chasing that, and I thought I enjoyed it, and I did. I did enjoy it.
Yeah.
And I think I was in it for almost 10 years. And I'd been to London, I'd been to Singapore, I'd been to South Africa, and I'm from Zimbabwe. So, it took me around the world, gave me great opportunities, but there came a time where I realized it's not me. It took a while, but there came a time.
Awesome stuff. Right. And at the moment, and something else why I also connect with you, Justin, is that over and above what you do, the other day I reached out to you and I said, Justin, I want to build a school. And you challenged me around building a school. And you said, why do you want to build a school? And because of the journey that you have traveled for 5 years, where you are looking after a community, an underprivileged community, but you are actually taking it up from, it's not just building a school, or should I say just plugging in to solve the problem, but you guys are actually looking at a bigger scale in terms of the impact in that society. You want to give us a short snippet on that?
So, going back to the school scenario, I like it because I've walked that journey. I'm part of an organization that builds schools. And as we went down that journey, it was like, all good and well, we've got a school, but we've got no teachers. Okay, right. Then you start looking for teachers, and where do the teachers stay? What's their accommodation like? How are we looking after them? How are we teaching them? How are we training them? And that's when I realized it's yes, the children benefit from it, but if we don't look at the holistic, then how do we solve the problem? And that's very much the same problem that I've come up against in farming, which was a new entrant into farming. Great, let's give money for people to start farms. But why do so many farmers fail? What is the reason for that? I've seen it world over. It's not South Africa, it's all over the world. Trillions of dollars put into farms that become cow sheds a year, 2 years later. And that's where my mind started going. And it was like, well, what's the reason? And it was the same thing. There's a lack of mentorship. There's a lack of teachers. There's a lack of grounding in terms of reality. And that's where I felt we could plug a gap in what I call the future of farming, because I believe in 10, 15 years' time, every farm's going to be doing what we're doing. It just is what it is. So, yeah, that's kind of taken me on that journey to kind of where we are now, which, through COVID and all, has helped me to process a lot of it.
Yeah.
Completely.
Awesome stuff.
All right.
Let me not steal a lot of your time. Can I give you the reins so that you can go in and preach the word of aquaponics?
Awesome. All right, guys. Thanks very much for joining me on this rather chilly Saturday evening, and to be presenting you with, I'm hoping, something quite new, something a little bit different, something that might capture you from the side. So what I want to present to you today is pretty much aquaponics. And I'm going to take you through a shortish presentation to help visualize what I'm talking. And so 5 years ago, I started a company called Ichthus. And the business over the last 5 years has pretty much grown. It's evolved. It's morphed. It's changed shape. But that's what entrepreneurship is. So like TJ said, I'm Justin. I come from a fairly interesting background. I was born in Zimbabwe, studied in South Africa, worked pretty much all over the world for a multiple number of banks. But I ended up coming back to South Africa when my wife was pregnant. And I got presented with an opportunity to acquire a piece of land. And the land was pretty central in Midrand, quite close to work. And on that piece of land, the seller was doing a type of farming that I'd never seen. And I love farming. But this type of farming blew my mind. I saw an integration so natural, but yet so unnatural, that I was gripped by it. I purchased the property, I purchased the business, and from there, Ichthus was born. Since then, we've started a number of different areas. We've got what we call Ichthus Managed Farms, which is where we help people to farm. We've got an academy, a consulting. We've got a fresh produce distribution. We have retail, online and physical. And we have the Ichthus Foundation, which is very close to me. Essentially, the foundation is where we give back to farmers who need support, who need coaching, who need mentoring, and who need help. So now I've confused everyone by saying this word aquaponics. It sounds futuristic, but what is it? Well, quite simply, aquaponics comes from two very, very different methods of farming. The first is aquaculture. The second is hydroponics. When those two come together, we've got aquaponics. Now, I've probably confused everyone even more by throwing in more terms. So let's break it down. I get it's a combination of aquaculture, and I get it's a combination of hydroponics. But once we understand those two farming methodologies, you'll understand more about what I do. So I'll come back to that, but aquaculture, at the end of the day, is farming aquatic species. So this could be farming anything that lives in water, from algae to perlemmon to trout to tilapia to cob. I mean, anything aquatic that is farmed is aquaculture. And in the background here, you can see one of the very first fish tanks we had. And in the simplicity, it's feeding fish and growing them.
For some humor, you see how some of these fish thoroughly enjoy the food nonetheless.
So there you see some red tilapia being fed, loving their feed. As they eat, they grow. As they grow, we cull, we sell. It's food and it's protein. And it's one of the most efficient forms of protein that there is. Then on the other side, hydroponics. It's the growing of plants in a soilless media using nutrient-rich water. Basically, in English, that means I'm growing plants without soil, using water that has been enriched with nutrients. Now, a typical hydroponic farm enriches their water with chemical nutrients because that's the cheapest form of nutrient for the plant that they want to grow. And as you can see in this picture here in the background, this is about a 5-hectare hydroponics farm growing mainly lettuce and mint. And essentially, all of those plants are above the ground, and water is just flowing along the roots of those plants, feeding them what they need. So what does it mean if we bring these two farming methods together, fish farming and hydroponic farming? or growing plants without soil? Well, when we bring these two together, we end up with a methodology of farming that utilizes 95% less water than conventional farming. So I am growing fish and I am growing vegetables. Fish need water to live, and yet I'm using a fraction of the water that you use on your garden. That is because I recycle absolutely all the water that I can. The only water I lose is through evaporation and what the plants consume. The second reason why aquaponics is so revolutionary is that it comes in at a 30% lower cost than hydroponics. Why is it a lower cost? Well, the fish and the fish poop and that whole process provides the bulk of the nutrients I need to grow my plants. And as a result, it works out much cheaper to feed my fish than it does to buy hydroponic fertilizers. And for me, these two metrics leave very few other options available when it comes to choosing how to farm or what method to choose when farming. And so when you dig deeper into this relationship between combining fish farming and plant growing, where the water from my fish goes to my plants extract the nutrition from that water and return clean water back to my fish, is actually pretty much symbolic of what nature does. If you look at a river system and dams and reeds and weeds and plants and grass, it all works hand in hand. But the advantages of aquaponics don't stop at just two advantages. There are many, many more. One of which is that you can multi-crop, meaning you can grow a wide variety of plants at the same time. Now, you might say, well, duh, but the truth is every plant in a hydroponic environment needs very specific nutrition. And if I'm growing a lettuce and a tomato, they eat different things. They need different nutrients. Now, if I grew them hydroponically or traditionally, I've got to apply different fertilizers to the two crops. But in this method, I can grow both of those crops in the same system with very little changes to the type of feed those plants are getting. The second one that I love to hang on to is that it's certified by nature. What that means is you don't need fancy organic certification. If my product was not pure organic and I used any type of pesticide, herbicide, be it organic or not, that was remotely harmful to a human, it would kill my fish. And if it doesn't kill my fish, it definitely will kill the bacteria that the whole system depends on. I've spoken about water usage, the fact that one waste from my fish, which is a waste in fish farming, becomes a beneficial source for another type of farming. You don't need fancy filtration. Because my plants are much healthier, you'll see fewer pests, less disease in your crops because your plants are being fed a much healthier diet. I mean, it's like us taking multivitamins, eating a healthy, balanced diet. We get sick less often. And just to say, today's like the first day that I haven't felt 100% in a very, very long time. Your yields, you're looking at 4 to 8 times the yield versus conventional farming, meaning I can grow in a small space, I can grow up to 8 times as much produce. I don't need artificial fertilizers, and I can do it anywhere. So I can set up very, very close to my market, meaning if my market is a hospital, I can set up a farm on the roof of that hospital. If my market's a school, I can set it up on the unused parking lot of that school. Your options are endless. So You get to choose where to farm as opposed to the land dictating where you can farm. And the last, obviously, it's incredibly environmentally friendly. There's very little wastage, very little power, very little water usage. And we all know that water is becoming one of the most scarce resources in the world. They predict in 5 years' time, South Africa will be in a water deficit, meaning we are consuming more fresh water than we can get. So let's face the reality. Water is not an unlimited resource for us. So how do we go about choosing where to farm? Well, the first is your market. And this is where this type of farming differentiates us, because how I design and where I locate my system is dependent on what people want to eat, what's popular, and also how much does it cost to actually transport it. Now, the fact that I can be close to my market reduces most of my overheads. I've got to look at what does the seasons look like? What are the structures around? What is the water quality? How much is there electricity? Now, this method of farming does depend on electricity. So if I don't have electricity, well, I need solar, or I need alternative forms of power. Here's a picture that brings back many smiles. So this was the first rainbow trout that we grew out and harvested. And in the background, you can see a whole load of cauliflowers, tomatoes, kale, chive, spring onion. And this was pretty early on in my journey. But what was really interesting with this was when I started aquaponic farming, obviously you farm fish and you farm plants. Now, what I found in my first couple years was in Johannesburg, we have extremely cold winters and we have warm summers. But yet everyone around me was farming a fish that was almost impossible to keep alive in winter unless I had heating. And so I asked the question, why does nobody farm rainbow trout? It grows faster, it tastes better, and it's much more tolerant of the cold, and it can handle to a degree the temperatures we reach in summer. Professors, many professors, experts told me you can't do it. You can't farm trout in Johannesburg. It's simply impossible. And obviously being me, I don't like being told what I can't do. So I went and got some trout and started to experiment. And we grew them out successfully for a year. And very interestingly, I'm wearing the same jacket as I am in this photo. So obviously winter's upon us. We started experimenting more as the farm grew. We started looking at the benefits of artificial lighting. What does artificial lighting do to the actual growth rate of my plants? The electricity use versus the additional revenue. And we found some really interesting results in that certain crops just need a couple hours of extra light through the winter, and they grow perfectly well. This is our farm as we started to expand it. To put it into picture, I was living at the property next door. I purchased a vacant piece of land next to me, and we started to grow and expand our farm. As I got better and as we understood the methods, we then grew with that. And it's a very important note that you got to grow within your means, because when you are running a farm, even of this size, just the operating costs alone have the possibility to sink you unless you know how to mitigate all of those risks. We've grown some of the most beautiful tomatoes, some of the best lettuce in Joburg, and if anyone here is from the midstream area, you'll have seen our produce in midstream, Super Spa, Ridge, Littleton. Our lettuces are incredibly popular. When you taste it, it goes with the brand, taste the difference. It's pure, it's natural, it's organic, it's sweet, it's delicious. Our fish have ended up in a number of food lovers, a lot of the top-end restaurants in Johannesburg, some of the top restaurants source their fish from us because it is so fresh and so clean. We've ended up being able to get into the likes of Pick n Pay, Spar, and Checkers. But all of that came at a cost, and it came with a learning curve that I was not expecting. So it all sounds good. It all sounds great. And everyone wants to now jump in to be an aquaponics farmer. But the reality that I've learned in my years farming is that there's a lot more to it. There's so much more to farming than any of us give the farmer credit for. When we buy something in the shop, we never stop to think, what has the farmer been through to deliver this product? When we are shopping the day after Christmas, we never think the farmer had to harvest that and have it delivered so it could get to the shop, so I could just have the benefit of buying it after Christmas. So farming and the economics of farming is something that is complex on one hand, but I also feel not so complex. At the end of the day, we need to reduce our cost to produce, and we need to increase profitability. Well, if you get those two right, the scale should make sense. I reduce my cost to produce because my fertilizers and water and the likes are so much lower. My profitability goes up because I tap into an organic market, which allows me to naturally sell my product for more. But it doesn't stop there. Over the years, we've set up systems all over the world. This is a system in Mauritius. These guys were growing in an area that was apparently impossible to grow in. This is how our farm is in Johannesburg. This is a farm in Durban that was set up a number of years ago. Here's the trout I was telling you, the very first batch of trout that we grew out in our water. This is a farm, the very first farm that was set up on top of a shopping mall. At Eastgate Shopping Center, we set up the very first aquaponic farm on top of a shopping center in Africa, and I'd probably say in the world. Now, the logic, if I have a farm above my customers, surely it should be profitable. This is my son, who no doubt you'll see just now popping his face in, enjoying fresh produce at that farm on top of a roof, eating freshly caught trout and salad that didn't even have to move 10 meters to get to his plate. This is the future of farming. But when you look at the economics deeper, there's a lot of elements that go into getting what I call my cost per square meter of operations low enough in order to be able to make a profit. Now, your cost of operations is a lot more than just labor and electricity. It includes rent, fish food, fingerlings, pesticides, fungicides, and that's all organic pest control, test kits, petrol, consumables. Whichever way you look at it, you end up with a cost per plant. And as I dug deeper into this, I started realizing, well, economically, if I'm farming 1 square meter of grow space and I grow 25 lettuce in that square meter, and all of my operating costs come to 74 Rand just to grow that square meter of lettuce, in which I grow 25 heads of lettuce, it leaves me with a cost per lettuce of approximately 3 Rand. Then I've got processing, I've got packaging, labeling, delivery. And if I look at the markets available to me, Johannesburg market, maybe 2.50 Rand a lettuce. A realistic supermarket might give me 6 Rand, but an organic market might give me 10 Rand. So as you unpack, what I love with this method of farming is that it is so predictable in terms of what it's going to cost, how much you're going to get out. And because you can control most of the weather elements around you and reduce a lot of your costs, as I've mentioned before, the end of the day, it has to make financial sense. Now, as you can see from here, your margins are small. You don't have huge margins to work with. So if I have to output huge capital to start up my farm, I've got boreholes, ESCOM connections, groundworks, I've got tunnels, I've got installation, I've got leveling, I've got digging, I've got you name it, cauldrons. Your capex goes up and up and up. Now, where's the margin for the farmer to recoup their capex at the same time be successful? It's very hard. Yes, I've got fish sales, which help. And, you know, in that small system I showed you just now, you're looking at harvesting about 1,300 kilos of fish a year. Gives you an extra 7,000 Rand revenue per month. You might get 14,500 on that small system in veg sales, depending on what profit you sell it at. But the challenges get in the way of new farmers. There is no support. There's no education. Our education is so outdated that schools still teach us to plow, even though plowing is more detrimental to your yields in the long run. We don't have human capital. We don't have people trained to come work on our farms, especially the likes of aquaponic farms. The cost of inputs is going up all the time. And as a new farmer, how do I get access to scale? How do I get access to bulk purchasing when I don't need that much? Where do I get good fish? Where do I get good seedlings? How do I maintain my system? But what about the rest? Sales, HR, marketing, capital, infrastructure. These are the challenges that people are facing as farmers on a daily, weekly, yearly basis. So what we decided to do last year was completely turn our farm around and set up the first agri-hub business model. This business model was geared around offering all of the services that we learned, all of the clients we had gained, all of the expertise that we had, and share it with new farmers who would rent tunnels. They would rent the tunnel, the aquaponics farm. They would get access to our clients. We would pack their produce and deliver their produce for them and give them a fair price for what our customers paying for a processed product. But they get daily consultation. They get regular training. They don't have to worry about HR, finance, sales, offices, internet, you know, support teams. We take care of that. And what we did was put together this support model that brought everything together and said, if farmers had the opportunity to go and just farm and not worry about sales, marketing, packaging, distribution, HACCP, global gap, HR problems, you know, financing their entire farm. Because what we found was a small farmer wants to start. Well, you need a pack room, you need a vehicle, you need an office. You know, no matter how big or small you are, you needed these things. And as we started to be able to share those, the costs came right down. And as you can see, getting the model right with an initial capital outlay on the right of approximately 3.5 million to install all of the core infrastructure. For every tunnel I put in, on that tunnel, I put an investment of about 500,000. And just with my monthly rentals, less my core basic costs, that tunnel is repaid within 4.5 years. For the farmer coming in, yes, they pay me the rent. They pay all of their expenses. They get their produce sales and they make a profit. But the difference here is they only need 121,000 to start farming, not 3.5, 4 million. So with 121,000 and 1.5 years later, with the right support, that farmer is able to be profitable, to learn, to understand, to learn the tricks of the trade that the generations haven't passed down to them. But most importantly, secure the future of agriculture in South Africa. So as I mentioned, within the hub, there's a lot of services that need to be provided. There's the academy. This is regular training. It's courses that we do that the hub renters are part of. They go through all of the training from very basic to absolutely advanced commercial. We've got a hatchery on site where we're breeding fish for them of the highest quality and ready on demand. We've got a construction team that's there ready to set up, to fix, to maintain, to keep the system running. So on weekends, the farmer can have a weekend. On Christmas, the farmer can have a Christmas. Again, adding to work-life balance. The pack house takes care of all the stress of filleting, processing, packing, distributing. Because let's face it, if I'm a farmer, why am I expected to be a marketer, a sales agent, a driver, a distribution agent? That's what's expected of a lot of the small startup farmers. So at the end of the day, when we bring the hub concept together, what we're looking to achieve is the ability to fast track the future of South African farmers without the need for huge capital outlay, but most importantly, ensuring that funds that are put into agriculture have multiple rewards. Because these farmers, when they're ready, are able to go spend 3.5, 4 million for their own farm at the right size and not make the mistakes that 90% of the farmers are doing. So I'm glad I got to kind of wrap that up and, you know, just summarize my thoughts around agriculture, to talk a bit about, you know, for me, it's just a different type of real estate. It's a different type of property. And what I've said to everyone that I work with is the land that you're farming on, that land must be appreciating and working for you. It must be in the right area. It must be in the right location. And so 10 years time or 15, 20 years time, when you want to sell your farm, that land has appreciated substantially. And that has made you good returns, not only the farm.